Following on from the demo I have done on my existing bookkeeping spreadsheet, I've created several new versions of the spreadsheet that also now incorporates importing data from Stripe, PayPal and your bank accounts. So you no longer need to manually input this data and categorize it. You can just download your statements from each of the accounts and import it into the spreadsheet. You still need to categorize it, but then once that's done, it will add all of the information into the profit and loss statement, and you can get a good view of where you are with your business, and so it makes bookkeeping that much more easy. So let me just drop into the spreadsheet now and I'll show you what's changed. So here we are in the instructions tab in the bookkeeping spreadsheet. This, along with a few other tabs, always exists in all of the spreadsheets. So the instructions may vary based on what tabs you have, but there will be one there. The setup also will exist, and within that you can define your currency, your tax year start dates, what your goals are for profit each month. Also the expense categories, so you have quite a few there that you can configure yourself, along with the revenue streams and payment sources. I'll cover these tabs in a minute. I'll come back to those because that's where the differences lie in this spreadsheet. But again, all of the spreadsheets will have a dashboard, most of which will be, let me scroll back in, most of which will be similar to this. If you haven't got a version with Etsy, then obviously the Etsy data will not be displayed, and so I move the charts around a bit. But other than that, it's essentially similar data that's been displayed. Profit and loss is also displayed, no matter what version you've got, but again, depending on whether Etsy is included will determine whether you have the Etsy sections. Similarly for the business year summary, that also, if you haven't got an Etsy version, you won't see the Etsy breakout, but other than that, you'll see all of the different sections that you've defined in the setup for income and expenses. And again, finally, the monthly report. That will only show the Etsy data if you've got the Etsy tab, so if you've got an Etsy version, but everything else will be the same. So those tabs that I've just shown you exist in all of the versions. If you've bought a US version, you get this extra tab which breaks out all of the sales by state. So it tells you what tax has been collected and whether Etsy's paid it on your behalf or whether you still need to pay it. And so you can go through each state for that. And it also shows a breakout of the states, so you can get a view all in one go of all of the sales or quantity sold or number of orders, and those are broken down it's broken specifically down into those because different states have different threshold values as to how many orders you can sell before requiring to pay tax, how much the revenue is, what the quantity is, and each one's different, so you'll need to look at those individually. So this gives you a heads up of whether you're in the right sort of ballpark for a state, and then the sales tax, the US state Etsy sales tax summary tab will show you the breakdown per state to see whether tax is required or not. If you haven't got a US version, then you will still see the sales map, and you have a sales tax summary as a whole on a month, rather than it being broken down on a state-by-state basis. It will give you the overall tax summary of what tax needs to be paid. as in sales tax. It doesn't take into account tax that may be refunded because of expenses, etc. That's where you would need an accountant to go through these figures, but you can just feed these information to the accountant and they should be able to then tell you what's required from there. So they're all of the reporting tabs based on the transaction data that you put in. So if we now take a look at the transaction data, so this is where you input your data. So this is the same and covered in the previous version of the video. It's got the Etsy orders and Etsy payments. You download the statements from Etsy, you download the orders from Etsy, copy and paste, put that information in, and it feeds into profit and loss and all of the other dashboard data. The same with the other revenue and other expenses. They're also, I think I went through it in the other demo, and again, put in the information and it will feed out into all of the other reporting tabs. So the bits that are new are import data from Stripe, PayPal and your bank accounts. Now Stripe is used as a revenue stream, so you can accept payments into it. And so rather than having to enter all of this information separately and then add the fees into your expense tab, so what I was doing personally was manually inputting the data here for the income and then going through and putting the kind of the same data again in the expenses but with the fees. And what I found when I started importing the data from my own accounts, that I'd actually missed some by doing it manually. So this really helped me and it saved me time. So you download the statement from Stripe. There's instructions when you buy the spreadsheet as to how to do all of this. But you download the statement, import it, and then the menu here is the one that you've set up in the Setup tab. So it's all of your revenue streams that you want to include, and you just go through and say what that transaction's about. Now some of the transactions are failed transactions, so you don't need those. I couldn't find a good way of getting all of the data out of Stripe without it excluding the failed tabs and the failed transactions, because it didn't include the refunded, or you had to produce several. So I thought it easier to create one file, and then there's automatically some processing that I've done for you that will tell you to ignore any rows that are failed. So anything that's got ignore in there, leave it blank in the revenue stream and it won't be included in any of the reporting tabs. And that's true for all of them. If you leave the categorization field blank, then it will not be included in the profit and loss statement and all of the other reporting tabs. So for every row that is in existence there, then you just need to go through and categorize it. For PayPal, it's slightly more complex because it's using expenses and revenue. And so we have a column here that automatically works out whether it's a revenue or whether it's an expenses row, or if it's something that's to be ignored because of currency conversions and so on. So that's all there. So anything that's got ignore in there, leave it blank again in the categorization, and it will not include it in the reporting. But based on the type that it is, i.e. revenue or expenses, you get a different menu. So the menu based on the setup, but this is your revenue menu, and this is your expenses menu that you've set up. So you categorize it as you see fit, and that information will then be fed into your reporting tabs. And finally, we've got the bank statement that you can import. So again, on most banks give you the option of downloading a bank statement. Not all bank statements are the same. Well, they kind of are, but the titles of the columns are different. Some of them have spurious blank columns in there. So rather than just being a simple cut and paste, it's a cut and paste as in cut and paste it column by column for each month, so that you can get the information that you need and you're not getting any of the extra columns that might be there. But once you've done that, it's exactly the same as PayPal. So its revenue and expenses are automatically calculated for you, and you then just categorise it accordingly. So we have revenue menu and we have expenses menu. So categorise it as you see fit. If you leave it blank, then it's not used in the reporting. And indeed, some of these rows you do leave blank, because you will have already accounted for them in your Stripe and PayPal and Etsy payment information. So all of your Etsy details are put in here. The fact that you get a payment into your bank account is great, but that content, those values, are already accounted for, so you don't need to include it in your revenue from your bank account. Same with Stripe and same with PayPal. So anything that is to do with that side of data, it may be that you just don't include. Once you've got all of that information imported it, then it filters through automatically and updates the report accordingly. So there you are. That's the new spreadsheet. Going through all of the different versions of it. If you're interested in trying it out, then there's a link below which will take you to the shop to purchase it. And hopefully you found that interesting and explains more about why there is so many versions. Any questions, let me know down below.